What is up, Generals? We are back with Ultimate General Civil War in the J&P Rebalance Mod. We are playing Release Candidate 1.26, and this is the Confederate Major General Let's Play. We're heading into the Battle of Stones River. As I mentioned in the last video, the plan is to deploy Lee in the south, Fiasco in the deployment map north, but really he ends up mostly being in the middle, and then Johnston in the deployment map center, but he really ends up being in the north mostly. We do the deployment -1 trick, which nets me 6 extra units in the opener, which really does make a big difference in terms of keeping Confederate momentum moving in the north here. We deploy heavy artillery and an infantry in a defensive focus in the middle, with the remainder of Lee's command deployed here in the south in a very heavy push to outflank the Union position on the extreme right corner of the Union line, the fish hook down here at the bottom. One thing that's frustrating about this video is you'll notice there's going to be some stuttering, probably a lot of stuttering. And that is an artifact of the recording process, I think. So while I was recording this battle, I was also streaming to the Discord, the Rebalance Discord. So I was recording the video once, and I was also streaming it simultaneously, along with audio and everything else, to the Discord. So the audio is being recorded twice, once by OBS, and then once again by Discord. Not that I think it's really recording it on Discord side. At the same time as that's happening, it's trying to write to my hard drive, which is a solid state. So that part shouldn't be that bad. And then at the same time as it's trying to do all of those things, it's also trying to, play the game. So these things shouldn't individually be all that system intensive. It seems as if the combination of all of them together, however, may be taxing the system beyond what it can handle. I didn't capture this until it was over, and this is, a 3+ hour long original recording. So we are playing the feedback or the post video, the playback at like 250% time. Now, unfortunately, you won't really get a sense of that because, it's going to look like a slideshow on your end. Hopefully, however, you should be able to follow the broad strokes of the battle and get a loose idea of where I was and what I did and where I maneuvered and everything else as we go through things. So, as a caveat to that, with regard to the video, I do want to apologize because that's not the usual quality I like to get. Unfortunately, I can't roll the battle the save back to fight Stones River over again, and honestly, I'm not super duper inclined to do so anyway. This is going to be a lesson I take forward and don't repeat, but beyond that, sucks. So, with regard to the south, we have in the open, deployed just outside of rifle range of the Union position, 4 skirmisher units: 5th Alabama, 6th Grenadier, 2nd Tennessee Light Infantry, and the 1st Virginia Sharpshooters. There is as well a swarm of infantry, heavy infantry, led by Lee himself. Mostly, this is where you find the majority of my 2-star units, and that is because I expect this portion of the battle line to be doing a lot of the maneuvering and fighting, so they might need to fight tired. Well, I want to avoid that, obviously, but they might be in a position where they have to fight after marching for a long period of time. And the hope is that the 2-star units are going to have a higher stamina and better condition in order to keep up with, or a higher stamina with which to keep up a higher condition while also marching and fighting at the same time. Our light infantry is able to keep up a pressure on their artillery unit that's here in the south. They have 3 brigades, although at any one point in time we're only ever seeing 2 of infantry, and then there's quite a bit of cavalry as well in their woods. As you can see, the infantry is slowly working on trying to extend its flank leftward or contra rightward of the Union. Lee himself is sort of acting as the vanguard to flank out. And the hope or thought process there is I wanted enemy units to see Lee and try and go after him, essentially, because he's a general. He's fast enough, he can probably get out of the way, and that might be able to draw the Union out of position. The Union launches an ill-fated attack from their defensive positions on my position in the center, and well, I didn't really have a divide and conquer kind of plan for this battle. I had more kind of a hammer and anvil plan. It ends up kind of working out that they attack so aggressively, take some pretty lopsided losses, and then just get hammered into submission. The entire time, the counter battery force, which is predominantly composed of really almost all of the Confederacy's counter battery mission, is working on smashing their artillery presence here into submission. This is, I think, once I get their cannon out of the equation, I really have a lot of freedom to attack. A lot of freedom to maneuver and operate kind of on my own timetable. It doesn't look mega mobile here, obviously, but they do kind of attack with a lot of gusto in the center, and it just kind of keeps getting thrown back because they're in the open and I'm in cover, and there's a little bit of an uphill in the central position. Here you can kind of get a glimpse of the Cav swarm. This is just a bit of it. There's 2 more units that we kind of don't get a good scene of here. We're able to enter in the south of the Union position, and once we're in cover, kind of things unravel for them very quickly. I get in there with the light units, and then almost immediately I followed up with a very heavy attack from the heavy units, kind of attempting to wrap their position. And the overall design goal for this attack is that, at least at this portion of the line, the Union defense is fairly thin. So it's a long front, and it's well developed, and it's got a good hook on its bottom edge that I'm attacking through right now. But from a north-south perspective, from a north-south perspective, the Union position is very long and very well developed. But from an east-west perspective, it's fairly thin. And so if I penetrate here, I can flank a lot of their troops and make it very difficult for them to hold their defenses. Now, they come charging out of their woods at my units, but because they're getting flank fire from 3 or 4 different skirmish units, and then I fall back with 5th for a bit, this attack of theirs kind of falters before it gets to the woods and fails to make contact. So now what I'm doing is I'm trying to stabilize my position and continue extending my flank out to the left. I really, really want to wrap and pincher the Union command. And so I'm increasing the amount of space per soldier as much as I can, and I'm trying to avoid tripping the flag if at all possible. I want to kick them out of their position. I want to convince them that the south down here is untenable, but I want to deny them at every step access to the... I don't really care if they guard the flag, but I want to deny them access to cover. So I'm always working on trying to put my guys in the cover and then attack them in a place where they feel obligated to try and fight me. In a lot of this, I've got the skirmisher units sort of tricking the AI vis-a-vis the fact that the AI will often target the closest thing that it sees. So I've got a skirmisher unit running up at point blank and pointing a volley of, skirmisher rifle fire into them and then running away. And in the time that it takes the unit to adjust to this and turn to face the skirmisher after eating that volley in their flank, they'll then get a volley from one of these line infantry units. And that kind of a combination is not really mega tenable. At the same time, you can see kind of in the upper left of the screen, the Union still has quite the swarm of cavalry. It is mostly carbine cav. There is, I believe, a brigade of melee calves somewhere in there, although now that I'm looking at the screen, I don't see one, so maybe there was just a particularly aggressive carbine cav unit. But the cav units themselves are all quite large. They all started somewhere in the vicinity of like plus or minus 700, some bigger, some smaller, but in that range. And they have been being kind of battered the whole time. The tactical question that is placed upon the Union or the Confederate Army in this particular situation is, how do we crack this walnut? Because the Union has tried to attack my position in the center and they have failed. And now my troops are harassing or lapping at their rear. And so they have consolidated a lot of their command into this sort of central bucket. And I lack the troops and I lack the firepower to really kick them out of the woods decisively. And I lack the ability to really kind of turn that into a truly advantageous kind of attack. So I could push into these woods, but to do so would, I think, cost me more lives than makes sense. And at the same token, or all actually by the inverse token, I'm kind of looking at like, well, okay, but then to blast them out will take the remainder of the hour and 15 minutes I have left, while probably not getting them all and costing me, hundreds or possibly even thousands of dollars in ammunition. Now, truth be told, I'm not terribly concerned about the money portion of it. And there's this copse of trees to the bottom right, where the Union is kind of retreating its troops, and I should, but I'm not. I should be moving and placing troops there to close that particular avenue of retreat off to them. I don't, and that ends up biting me in the ass later. But for the time being, I just develop my position. I'm continuing to try and press with the infantry. I want to push whatever segment of their command that I can into the corner and try and just... Basically, I'm trying to like bite off little chunks of it and destroy it before trying to attack the larger whole. So we're kind of picking at this bigger dish, which, not for nothing. I understand that I'm on Major General. I understand that they're not really mega inclined to attack what they perceive as being a very well supported enemy position. But I'm a little disappointed at how passive they ended up getting here. And I think... part of this, Panda was actually on stream with me while I was doing all this, and he had some great commentary that essentially spoke to the AI in the game here. And a big part of what I remember him saying was something loosely to the effect of, as long as you follow the plan that the AI thinks you're going to follow, it does a pretty good job of being a reactive, kind of living opponent. And as soon as you don't do whatever thing it thinks you're supposed to do, it kind of doesn't really know how to respond to that. So here in Stones River, you're kind of supposed to attack from the front, which is just suicidal. And you're supposed to smash into the Union and like a wide frontal general attack, which just seems all kinds of dumb. I'd imagine that is historically at least partially what happened, because the designers of this game have, for the most part, been pretty good about that kind of thing. But, I mean, in what universe would that make sense? I don't know. One, I guess, where you have perfect information and have replayed this battle 1,000 times, you're like, obviously I should flank to the left. But if you're coming at this for the first time, I suppose a general attack would make some degree of sense. Anyway, so I think what's happening from an AI perspective is I've so thoroughly trashed what it thinks my plan should be that it doesn't really have an alternative course of action. And so it just kind of dirtles around in wherever it feels safe or wherever it's not being routed. Which, I get it. There's only so much they can do to program the artificial intelligence here. We do manage to box up some of the cav in the corner, but some of it also is able to break out from the encirclement, which is fine. We get, I think, 3 of the 5 units I wanted to try and capture, and it only costs me, in terms of allocation, 4 brigades, 3 infantry and 1 skirmisher to wrap up those units and then destroy them. So that's essentially kind of what happens for the next little bit in game, is I just work on trying to whittle away at the length and breadth of the Union command. Take out a unit here, take out a unit there, etc., etc. So yeah, that's more or less what happens in the opener. We flank them. They don't really know how to handle it. And then I work on blasting the crap out of them. There are maybe a half dozen kind of abortive attempts to launch a breakout. Um, there's one charge here that ends up kind of involving the 25th North Carolina and the Grenzers. The Grenzers in particular really just do wonderful work here. They really kick all kinds of butt in the woods. I mean, this is like dream territory for a Grenzer unit, right? So they fight hard in the woods there, and they just kick all kinds of butt. There's another push here, but there's 2 units on one plus some supporting fire from skirmishers, so it's just never going to go well for them. The attacking infantry that had been being used to block off their cav in the corner joins a couple of units from my center. I'm in massing along the northern edge of the map, just north of the Union flag. And the thought process here is these units are intended to, well, I don't think I'm going to get everything, basically, in the remaining half hour I have of game time. I don't think I'm going to get all this stuff, and I don't. And so what I'm trying to do now is put troops in position so that I can block the Union troops here from rendezvousing with their allies to the north just off screen. And we're eventually going to take the central flag, but for the most part, my big objective right now is to just kind of prevent them from massing with their friends. It's quite possible, in my estimation, that at that juncture, these troops would have an idea of what to do, or alternatively would make attacking that flag even more precocious than it already is. And I mean, it's not like that flag actually matters. The only flags that really determine victory or defeat on this map are, I think, 2 phases away. So, like they're just a ways away from me even seeing them. And I think that might be part of the other issue as to why this thing stuttered like it does. This is a big map. This probably strains, I would imagine, the limits of what this game engine is really designed to handle. And I have a suspicion that all of these things combined, it just kind of overloaded my OBS's ability to record the video smoothly. I've had this happen in a couple of attempts to record video for other games that are slightly more system intensive. And there are things you can do to make sure that OBS is drawing as few system resources as possible so that you get a smooth recording. But sometimes it really is just going to come down to, I probably need to get a new CPU. This computer when I built it, it was on the high end of mid-range. But I built it 3 or 4 years ago, and it's got a Ryzen 5 1600. I forget whether it's the 1600 or the 600X. Regardless, it's a few generations behind, and I haven't really overclocked it. Now, I do have, good amounts of RAM, fast RAM, all that kind of stuff. It's a 100% solid-state drive system, so there shouldn't be, the bottleneck should probably not be the read-write. And this game isn't exactly GPU intensive, so it's probably not a GPU bottleneck either. I mean, I can, Battlefield 5, Division 2, these are newer games that are much more graphically demanding, and I have no issue running them. So I would imagine, based on all of that data, that likely what I'm looking at is a CPU bottleneck between streaming and recording at the same time, while also playing these larger, more system-intensive battles. Because I have actually recorded and streamed small side skirmishes and not really had an issue. So probably my thesis is then that it was a problem with the big battle. But I don't know why that should draw more resources from the system than a small one does, unless it's an issue with rendering that many more assets, which I suppose is not unreasonable. So the first section kind of times out and the map expands. I have a good chunk of the Union Army kind of bottled in And I keep on just kind of gingerly attacking their position in the center here. I want to obviously destroy or capture as many of those troops as I can, but I'm still not really in a position where I feel comfortable moving in aggressively to engage. There's still plenty of troops there. They have still got plenty of fight. Attacking jungle terrain is not exactly not jungle, but like wooded terrain uphill and everything else is not my idea of a good time, absent some support and everything else. So because there's not really a great explicit extant need to attack this force at the moment, I'm not gonna. I just keep on whittling at things, and then eventually I'll discover that I have an opportunity or an opening with which to attack, and I do. And like I said, we get the whole grouping to the south there. So in the north, there's this second form of the Union Command, and we get elements of my second corps, which probably should be my third corps. No, second corps. In the camp video, I had updated the corps names, and I think for whatever reason I forgot to save at the end of that video, frustratingly. So you see, it's second, third, and fourth corps, not first, second, and third, and then the reserve corps. So I don't really know what I did wrong there, but regardless, these troops are, I think, Fiasco's troops, but they could be Johnston's. And you know what? Considering Johnston's right there, center screen, they're probably Johnston's. So these troops are going to be mostly my volunteer units, the new brigades I formed that didn't quite tick over into 1-star. And essentially with them, all I'm doing is pulling them back from the front so they don't get shelled quite so heavily, and then utilizing the counter battery I have there to work on whittling away at their cannon. And I'm going to be moving some of the counter battery assets I have in this central position up north to work on de-gunning the Union near Turnpike Hill. But for the most part, I still have many of the gun assets remaining down here to continue shelling at the Union. As you can see, the Confederate troops are slowly tightening the noose, preventing the Union from really having a safe haven or anywhere safe to kind of fall back to or anything. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. Rather than like close in for the kill, I want to continue cycle routing them or cycle white shielding them, and just kind of continue, whenever that happens, move a little closer. One or two steps, that's all it takes. And, they'll rally and come back for another round in a second. But every time that they white shield or every time that they rout, you gain a little ground, and you press and you press and you press and you keep on going. And eventually, obviously, they'll just sort of run out of places to retreat. And that's all she wrote. One kind of cool, interesting thing that happens, though, is there's this big attack that materializes from the north, actually. And the Union kind of tries to break out its buddies. It tries to, blast a hole in my position and get its allies to the south here, a safe corridor back to the north. Now, they don't really support the attack well enough, but they may not have enough troops to properly launch that attack while also manning their front. So who knows? The attack is thrown back in relatively short order, but it does cause me to kind of really aggressively scramble my line. I have to kind of in a hurry get my troops in a position to meet them. Some guys stay in the trenches. Some guys go to the edge of the woods. It's just 3 brigades right now. There is some artillery on the southern. It's up near the flag. There's an artillery unit that's up near their flag on that recon point that's shooting at me, but it's probably like a 10-pound parrot or whatever. It's not hitting all that hard. And what I do is I rush down 2 volunteer units to fill these trenches here on the northern edge of my central position where Fiasco is. And then I advance with the 28th Kentucky Rifles and the 38th Georgia And then I also turn 12th Tennessee to face. And so these 3 brigades meet their 3 brigades. We exchange fire for a while. You can see some of the bodies in the open near what was the Union position. We exchange fire for a while, and they realize they're not going to press that attack, which they probably should try. I mean, they outnumber my brigades almost 3-1 in terms of just raw manpower. Now, there's 3 brigades. Okay, fine, but they outnumber them quite a bit. They ultimately don't press the attack, I think probably because all of the positions that they would attack, to their perception, are supported rear of the front line. So there's the front unit, and then there's units behind it, and the AI does take that kind of thing into consideration before launching an attack. So, those kind of things are probably what drive it to say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and take the L. Let's just kind of move on. In the top left of the screen, you can see 5th Alabama and a couple of infantry units are kind of developing my counterflank to the Turnpike Hill position. So right now I'm running down and trying to not capture, but destroy, or theoretically capture, the last cav unit that I'm currently aware of. And the hope then is that if I have denied them artillery and denied them cavalry, the Union will be without a lot of combined arms power. And so they won't really have the ability to maneuver quite so openly or freely, or certainly as quickly. And they'll also lack the ability to bombard. And stripping them of those 2 powers will, really just cripple in a lot of ways their army's ability to strike back at me. And it makes them very passive, because I can see an attack coming long before it actually gets to me. This is a big, broad field with lots of open room to maneuver. And so really, I think a lot of it is kind of, when you approach Stones River, you kind of have to think about it as like aggressive bunkering. It's a modern firefight in that regard. You are moving from cover to cover, and you are attempting to flank the enemy's position and deny them access to their own cover. So in a little bit, right here on the bottom right, you can see where my failure to occupy those woods on the bottom right of the screen are going to end up biting me in the butt later. I now have 4th Texas long rifles and looks like the 9th Virginia light infantry. Those units are in the open, as well as 2nd Tennessee light infantry down here in the south. All 3 of those units are intended essentially only to keep the Union from routing in that direction. So I want them to route away from... Wow. Honestly, I want them to route north, just straight north. Or alternatively, I'd like them to route like northeast into that open corridor. I think that's asking too much. That's too good to be true. So what I really don't want them doing is routing south. What I really, really don't want them doing is routing southeast into that defensive terrain. So what I'm really just trying to do here, 8th Virginia light infantry, sorry. What I'm really trying to do is convince them not to come at me, bro. I don't want them in that block of woods to the bottom right, because I can already tell that's going to be a thorn in my side come trying to like crack it and get at them later. I'll figure it out. And the way that I initially try to approach it is stupid is the word I'm going to use to describe my actions. It's like cool and that'll be fun and whatever. And I think cocky would be another way to describe it too. So they're shelling my units in the trenches there. I think they're volunteers, so like I'm not as worried about it. But until I can properly develop the position to the south, I don't feel like I can do anything about the north yet, and that's probably not accurate. I probably could have been attacking more aggressively than I start to. But I mean, I don't know. I wanted to deal with one threat completely before trying to take on a new threat. And have like a half-assed or in-proportional response to the threat to my rear. So I don't know. I hold my ground a little while. The map finally expands to include the entirety of the map, and this gives me the remainder of 4th Corps, which gives me a truly monstrous amount of cavalry, which they get a lot of stamina gain in this battle. This is a huge battlefield for them, and they cover a monstrous amount of territory. So I use these troops to, they're going to eventually kind of work on developing our position north of the 2 Nashville Pike objectives. And they're going to empower me to more efficiently attack the Confederate position, although that doesn't happen for a wee bit. So at this point, I'm giving them all move orders, trying to figure out what I want to do with them, trying to figure out what's going on with the map as a whole, etc. And off screen, in ways that I can't quite see, there are units that are near the 2 Pike flags, but I can't see them yet. So I'm thinking, what if I can capture one early? What if I can get 2 brigades up there, in no time? I might be able to, really destabilize their defensive position. What I don't realize is there's units already there marching into position, and they're big and they're fresh and all that kind of stuff. I am, for the most part, able to beat feet and get out of there before it really kind of bites me in the ass. But the Cav swarm, because I was kind of planning on unleashing a Cav swarm, the Cav swarm sees this and is like, oh, wait, no, let's not. There's 1 brigade there trying to cross the river. There's another manning some defenses on my side of the river, etc. So much of the Union position is well defended at the moment, and there's not really a good way to get at it. So I kind of call off the Cav attack, and I pull them back. At this point, I'm probably a little more passive with this northern echelon force than I should be. And I think that might be commentary, I'd say, for myself over the course of this whole battle. I realize like not all of it's mega visible, the mobility or whatever's happening, but top right of the screen, you can see my infantry moving into position to challenge the Union units defending the river crossings. I've got a brigade and eventually 2 more brigades making sure that they don't cross to our side. We've got some of my units deployed in these entrenchments here into the recon eye in the mid-right of the screen. And there's 2 artillery units, only one of which you can see right now, that are working on smashing Race's battery out of the equation. And as you can also see in the top left of the screen, there's Union infantry moving to move into those entrenchments, basically. And so I kind of hurriedly run away, bravely, obviously, from from that particular fight, deciding that discretion is a better part of valor. Unfortunately, while running away, I discover a Cav unit that has been lying in wait that I thought I'd dealt with and evidently hadn't. It ends up not really causing too terribly much damage, but it does kind of bruise my nose. Or bloody my nose on the way through, but ultimately it's been battered down from the mid 600s or 700s to now 200. So it's not long for the world. It gets a volley and calls it a day, and that's about it. So I'm closing the noose. You can sort of see it. I'm closing the noose on the Union position in the south, and there's this pretty significant Union force to the bottom right of my army. So it's behind or outside of my current lines, which obviously makes me nervous. I don't want that kind of a force operating back there. It would cause all kinds of mayhem with my plans for the rest of the battle day. But I mean, I have to deal with it somehow. Man, this is going to be a real pain to watch for you guys, isn't it? There's not It's not a lot of motion, and sometimes the lead time between movement is long. In the south, I am closing the noose. Here you can see, okay, finally good. In the south, I am closing the noose. I have heavy infantry from every side, except for some light troops that have pressed into the woods. I managed to capture a supply wagon. We end up capturing a good number of these guys, just because they've been fully surrounded, and they cycle route to the point where they've got, like, they throw down their guns and call it a day. And this really has taken a long time to whittle this particular force down. But, and while it has cost me losses, all these units have, lost 300-ish men, give or take. It's, I mean, we've obviously done far better than that. So we press in and then kind of attack that. It's not one of those things where, like, I charge it. I just kind of shoot it until they mass route into the open, and then I come and I swoop and I charge them. 2, maybe 3 brigades launch the charge, some skirmishers as well. We get some pretty quick mass routes and scoop up a pretty good chunk of the survivors, but obviously we've killed a huge segment of their force in the interim. The top of the screen, you can kind of see what's left over of another attempt to try and break them out coming from the north. It was maybe 3 brigades, one of whom was on the edge of shattering. As you can see, the 42nd is 1,000 men on the very top of the screen. So they're also on the edge of shattering, depending on how hard they get hit next. So with that being the case, I then begin earmarking forces back towards the north, and they're going to move on the central flag position, and then they're going to move eventually on the main 2 pike points. Additionally, I earmark some troops to deal with this force to the south. For the most part, I say let's let them rest before moving in, because if the AI wants to come out and try and attack me, that's actually better for me altogether than if they stand fast. What I really don't want them doing is, like, getting behind me or me going somewhere else in the battlefield to go do something else, and then them getting into my artillery or supplies or the rear of my infantry or something. It's just all kinds of bad, right? So I've got to deal with them. There's, I don't know, maybe 3,000 infantry in the woods and some cav. So it's not like it's this game-breaking force, but it's a problem that I need to deal with. And so I don't know if I've done it yet or I do it soon. And unfortunately, we're not getting, like, the video is more and more slideshowy than it was before. I select every unit of cavalry in the army, and I take all of it and I march it behind their force. And we attack them from the front, I think, with skirmishers, and then swarm in from the rear with cav. This would normally be a fine idea, and I actually do it later in the battle to great success. It would be a fine idea in the open. It is, we'll say, less of a good idea in cover. So they're in the woods, right? And even here's the cav coming down. They're in the woods. So even with poor condition and low morale and everything else, all this cav is really, it's not gonna really do much. You can see here, actually take a look at the cav swarm. So regulation size has been for a while now 350. I've got 1,000 man cav unit, 7th Virginia Dragoons. And they're kind of an experiment in using cav as a bit more of a battering ram. Or theoretically, if I get them enough experience, treating them as actual dismounted infantry. Because up until now, I've been kind of the opinion, like, why wouldn't I just use skirmishers? And generally, I still feel pretty comfortable with that that mantra of why wouldn't I just use skirmishers? But the mobility of true Dragoon Cav does, have a certain appeal. So anyway, we begin our attack in earnest on this hill here. And it is predominantly being carried out by the volunteers. I expect to take losses on the way in. So I want the majority of their attention focused on the volunteers. And so I've got an attack force composed of, it's basically a division and double line, coming at them from the front. I have more troops coming from the south, so you can see 21st Kentucky here launching the attack, but you can also see a couple of units to the very bottom of the screen moving up to support it. And then here's the cav charge. It's glorious. It's wonderful. It's also stupid. So I'm not even pushing in with my skirmishers yet. I've got 4th Texas Long and 1st Virginia Sharp peppering them with accurate sniper fire, but they're in the woods. They're in cover. They're, I figure like I've got 7 or 8 cav units, one of whom is 1,000 men, and you've got 3 battered units. Even if you are in the woods, I should be fine. No, I'm not. I do cause a great deal of damage, but I take losses exponentially inappropriate for the amount of damage I inflict. So it does not go great, we'll say. So we'll chalk this up to ideas I shouldn't be repeating in the future. We'll not do this again, shall we? Meanwhile, in the north, the attack is going off without a hitch. So I've got units attacking it from the south. I've got units attacking their position from the east and west, boxing them in. The only place for them to attack or to retreat is north to the safety of the Nashville Pike roads, which is fine. The brunt of the fighting is being borne by the volunteers, which the brunt of the initial casualties. There's still plenty of fighting that occurs. There's plenty of woodlands, ineffective fires that occur at point blank range, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm able to consistently wrap their formation, their macro formation, and get flank fires on units. And eventually it's not even like eventually, like pretty quickly, we eject them from this position. And a lot of that is made possible by the fact that earlier I was really insistent on not attacking this position until I had fully dealt with the threat to the south. And as you may imagine, I don't attack the turnpike position until I have fully dealt with this position. Actually, I don't really attack the turnpike position until I've fully dealt with being able to flank them. Because this is not the kind of thing you want to attack on the front. They're uphill. I'm in the open. They've got trenches. I don't. They're firing downhill. Like, they've got artillery support. There's units in the rear to help out. Like, I can't use those trenches, I'm pretty sure. So there's a lot of things going against me as an attacker here that really, really do actually encourage you to take your time if you can. And that's exactly what I do. So we attack, and it's pretty violent. I get 1 unit of my volunteers at point blank rifle range with up where Race's battery was. There were 2 batteries up there, and the volunteers evaporate 1 and just concentrate rifle fire. One of the brigades routes off because it gets canistered a couple times. And we end up, one of the reserve brigades that didn't get canistered puts a solid volley into Race, and Race white shields, and then I run them down. And even though they're 0-star units, they can still melee pretty well. So they do exactly that. Artillery is going to lose that fight melee-wise against infantry pretty much every day of the week. They'll outshoot them, until the cows come home, but they'll lose the bayonet on saber fight pretty solidly. So we're bringing up our rear reserves. These are troops who had been earmarked to watch the Union command of the South. Like I said, we do actually end up getting it, but we take way heavier losses than I think than that task force warranted. removing them. So on the one hand, yay, my rear is fully excised of blue-clad troops. On the other hand, man, those losses are not a good time. For the most part, that's pretty much all she wrote as far as what happens in the center for a while. Here on the screen, you can see I'm continuing to work to evict the Union from this central objective. And then we begin to consolidate our position there, deploy more and more troops, bring up the artillery, bring supply wagons around, make sure everyone has, ammo, is rested. I rotate several depleted units. So there's a couple of brigades here you see kind of below 1,000 men. I rotate them out of the front line. I push them either to the rear for a reserve, or I push them off to the extreme left to act essentially as a flank guard or an outrider defender. And then I move some of the volunteers or the units that are mostly fresh. I move them onto the new front line, et cetera, et cetera. The Union, for its part, continues to attack my force here. They do fall back behind the safety of their trenches, and then they sally forth. We have kind of a good back and forth for a while, but for the most part, at this point, my position is stable, and I've just got more and more and more soldiers kind of coming to support it. And this position here, where Lee and his troops are, and it's probably a lot of Johnston's troops as well, actually. Where those troops are is going to be the foundation upon which I eventually launch the attack on the East Nashville Pike. But I will do so only when all the troops that are north of the river have crossed and are providing, crossfire, rear flanking support fires to really convince the Union that maybe these trenches aren't actually a great place to be. And this is a shame to watch in this kind of a slideshow fashion. Again, I apologize. But yeah, so the next phase is, the next little bit here is cleanup. And then we get to the remainder of the battle. As you can see in the top right, we've only got about an hour and a half-ish of in-game time left. And you would think, there's no way that I'm going to be able to get the Union command around those two objectives whittled down enough in an hour to capture them. And if you'll look at how much time is left in the video, you'd be dead right. You would be very correct that I'm not going to be able to get them between now and when the finish button pops up. What's interesting, however, look at the timestamp. It's 12:48-ish on 31 December 1862. And I finished this battle sometime around 9 p.m. So you've got hours and hours and hours of time after that finish button pops to win this battle. And I asked around a little bit. It doesn't appear as if the Union gets more troops on day 2. So with the exception of using day 2 as an opportunity to exercise and maneuver your troops and pump the ever-living shit out of their stamina stat, there's not really a great deal of reason for me to move to day 2. And I already feel bad about making you guys watch a slideshow. So, I didn't. I don't go to stage 2 or day 2. We deal with all of these forces here. They just continue attacking my position, and it becomes even more suicidal every time they do it, because my troops are more and more rested, and I've got more and more guns online. Here you see some of the troops on my left who are developing that position there. The left is great. This position on the left is actually fantastic because it gives me a recon position, forward observing position, where I can get more and more and more sight on the Union trenches. And occasionally, if I feel the need to, I can actually launch spoiling attacks. I never really need to, because this is a really hard position for the Union to attack. So even though these brigades are pretty big, they've been battered down. They were 1,000 men larger before. So they're really not in a great place to launch these attacks, especially without artillery support, especially without the support of some of the fresh troops who are up there defending Nashville Pike, especially uphill against fresh troops who have support at multiple levels to their rear. So they attack a couple times and they end up getting whittled down a lot. Eventually they start shattering off. I'm not in a great position to launch offensive attacks that would seek to capture some of those units. So I shoot them down until they shatter, and that's all she wrote. So we have sort of the next phase of the battle, and that is me attempting to develop a northern flank to the Union position. So these are all troops who have, for the most part, not been involved in fighting up until now. So they are fresh. They are at full strength. I am allowing my Southern Command to rest and dig in, etc., continue blasting away at the Union. At this point, the Confederate position is largely well developed, and I'm continuing to skirt or scout, really, with 1st Virginia Sharp and 4th Texas Long on the top left of the screen. I'm continuing to kind of scout the edge of the map, trying to figure out where the flank of the Union position is. And I end up finding it, and I realize they're not really defending their rear. So their position should wrap. And as you can see, we'll watch this develop. But essentially, I get troops behind their position, and I cross the river at that ford. You see where the river kind of bends in a U. I cross the ford there, and we motivate would be a word that I would use. Union infantry to abandon their trenches on my side of the river, and that allows me to cross unmolested and enforce with the troops that are currently north of the river. And when we do that, we fundamentally destabilize the Confederate position the Union position. And in so doing, give me the break that I need to then launch a main attack with those troops who are south right now in the center. So I pin with 1st Virginia and 4th Texas. I pin this guy in the corner, and I could just shoot him down. These are 2 sniper units. They're both getting plenty of kills. I think the 1st Virginia has like 6,000. And I decide, hey, I'm fresh, and they're not. And I've gotten all the shooting experience I'm going to get in this battle, at least from 1st Virginia. They're already at 100 firearms. So why don't I get some melee? At this point, I'd been playing for about 2 hours. I'd been trying to keep up some kind of live commentary for about 2 hours, although honestly, a lot of the guys have gone to bed. So, yeah, man, that goes about as well as you think it's going to go. So not well is the answer we'll use. The units do perform very well. They do get plenty of kills. After all, a routing unit has a significant debuff to its melee efficiency. And in the case of 1st Sharpshooters, they were actually at like 95% condition when I sent them in there. It does eventually require me bringing the 2nd Tennessee Dragoons up, which is Forrest's old cav, or Stewart's. Is it Forrest or Stewart? You get a 3-star cav unit in one of these battles, and I forget whether they give you Jeb Stewart or Nathaniel Forrest, because I've long since had the the officer get wounded because I'm an idiot, and I use my cav way too aggressively. So I've been trying to shell this guy out of these trenches I've been doing it at canister range or shrapnel range with an artillery unit, a Napoleon armed artillery unit that's perked for a speed. It's a horse artillery unit. And I have forgotten that I have a supply wagon that I could bring. So it's shot through its entire native round of ammunition. And then, these units that fire ammunition after they've run out of rounds, I don't know where they come from. Like when it comes to infantry units, you can kind of like hand wave it as like, oh, they're scavenging extra rounds off of their dead comrades or off of the Union because both sides fired a .58 caliber round for most of the war, I would imagine. But like artillery, where are they conjuring extra 12-pound, shot and shrapnel? I don't know. So for today's video, we're going to assume the Confederacy have, because they lack heavy industry, attached a sorcerer to every battery. And that sorcerer can only conjure rounds at a slow rate without supplies. So that's, I guess, what happens. Anyway, you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm continuing to wrap with 2nd Tennessee Dragoons, 4th Texas Long Rifle, and 1st Virginia Sharp. I'm continuing to try and wrap their position. And Miller here, 3,300 strong Miller, crosses the river. And I don't get him before he gets to our side of the river, which is a real problem. Because even though he's firing uphill and we're firing downhill, and even though he's getting hammered with every volley, he's still a 2-star unit. And he's evidently perked for accuracy. So it's a pain in my butt. It's not a good time. At this point, I do realize I have a supply wagon, and I begin wheeling it forth to go support all these units because I've got 7th Alabama Light Infantry firing into Miller's flank. I've got the 20th Virginia firing in Miller, and I've got 3rd North Carolina firing at Miller as well as the 2 artillery units, which are both out of ammo. So Miller finally, after losing 800 men, decides to quit that particular attack, but not before costing me 400 2-star men. So, I mean, as far as the AI is concerned, that's a win. At the same time, as you can see this happening on the screen, I'm also crossing the river. And the order of operations for the things that happen next are kind of as follows. I begin detaching all of the skirmishers from all of the units that are up there in the top right corner. And I have the intention of sort of flying column assaulting Pascal, maybe? The brigade of infantry behind these trenches, except Miller routes across the river one way, and then while still routing, routes across the river the other way, pretty much immediately putting the kibosh on any plan I had to try and use the long rifles to support from the rear an assault on this trench line. I can't read his name from here, but looks like Pascal 2nd Brigade. He's got 2,500 men. He's behind trenches. That guy, him, Purnell, perhaps. I don't know. So I'm able to pretty reliably white shield Miller, but even 2 sniper units and the dismounted 2nd Dragoons, who are a 3-star unit. So I've got a net of 7 stars of infantry firing at Miller. They're still tiny units. They can't, destroy him in one volley or anything. So we're blasting the ever-living shit out of Miller, and you're going to see his numbers just like cascade downward. But it's preventing me from launching the offensive I wanted to launch. And I'm shelling, this guy in the trenches, whatever his name is. And that's like, it's effective, I guess, but it's only so effective because those trenches are pretty good cover and all that kind of stuff. And my thought process is if I launch, here you can see I'm starting to detach the skirmishers. If I launch a sufficiently large swarm of skirmishers, they will put ineffectual fire into those skirmishers. And then when the mass of proper infantry connects in just sheer weight of bayonets, will drown Purcell. And what will result in that is ineffectual volleys that probably shatters one unit of skirmishers and then maybe damages the crap out of another, and then we take the trench line. What ends up happening is the combination of all the artillery fire and the fact that I'm able to get a sniper shot, like one or two volleys from 1st Virginia and 4th Texas. He immediately white shields out of the trenches. And so now I'm in a very dangerous position because I've got Miller and this guy, Haskell, Purnell, whatever the hell his name ends up being. Miller and this guy up there. Looks like Haskell. Now that I can see it, and it's not interacting with the trench, I can kind of get a better read on it. So Miller and Haskell both up there. This is a big problem for me because they are routing into my guys. Fortunately, they are in pretty good condition, and we're able to pin them against immovable objectives or something and start sort of sapping their melee or their manpower off. In an attempt to get my infantry in there before they take off too many just kind of like ancillary casualties to my skirmishers, I'm rushing them forward, but they can't get there in time. So we're able to shatter Miller, and then I actually end up mounting. This is crazy that you can do this, obviously, but I end up mounting the Dragoons while they are currently in melee and run Haskell down. And the fact that I'm on horseback and I'm a 3-star unit and I've got all the stamina in the universe, he's not able to outrun me at that point. So that wasn't at all the way I planned that to go, but what it does, how it works out really well for me is now we've completely annihilated everything that the Union has in their force that isn't already in trenches defending the Nashville Pike. And that means they're static. That means they're going to be much easier to predict the locations of and to attack. And so now I'm resting the units in the north. We have, on the screen you can see I have selected the 42nd Black Watch. That is actually a throwback. It's not a Confederate unit, but it's the 42nd Infantry is, I believe, a Scottish infantry unit. And I believe they got the name Black Watch because of the color of their tartan. And the reason I made that unit, it's a commemoration to, they're just a cool unit with great history. Please do Wikipedia them. But when I was in the Army, I deployed to Afghanistan, and I was lucky enough to deploy to a joint command. So I myself and a small portion of my fellows were detached from our main brigade and assigned to a NATO unit in Afghanistan. And our formation was kind of very ad hoc, actually, because it was a soldier here, an airman there, a sailor here, all kind of seconded from other units that were in our big air base. And so the command authority was like, I reported like through 2 steps later to like an Air Force general, U.S. Air Force general. But to get to him, I guess it wasn't one rank. To get to the Air Force general, I went to an Army lieutenant and then a Navy captain and then a Marine Corps major. This is all U.S. so far. And then his commanding officer was an Australian Army colonel, I think. And about halfway through our tour, some of the units rotated out and some new units rotated in. And one of the groups of people that rotated in was a bunch of analysts and logistics specialists from where were they were British Army, and I think they were Scottish. I don't know for sure if they were actually attached to the Black Watch regiment, but I think they were. I don't know. I should have asked. I never did. But as far as I understand it, it is the only regiment that is currently still active in the British Army that is flagged as a Scottish regiment. So, I mean, it's probably that one. Anyway, so, I mean, they could just be also Scottish soldiers who were in a different unit that didn't have anything to do with a Scottish unit. That's also possible. Regardless, they were great dudes. Every single one of them was a real laugh, and they really made, it was a cool exposure to a lot of cool cultures. They had great jokes. They had found ways to make Afghanistan very fun, and they just had a very different kind of mentality to how they approached the whole situation, and it became infectious, and it turned that into a very fun year for me. So, punctuated with periods of not greatness, obviously, but by and large, a very positive experience. And a lot of it I attribute to my associations with those guys and a couple of guys from the RAF. So I have a very positive opinion just because they were very inviting, and they didn't give me any shit at all as a Yank. I mean, they gave me playful shit, but nothing that was serious. So when I came to 42 in my order of battle, I decided I wanted to go ahead and break from my established tradition of rolling a random state and attaching the number and then calling it a day. And I wanted to flag them as, kind of a thanks to Scotland and the British Army and the RAF for, for that experience. So you've kind of got on the screen. You can sort of see this is the end of the Union. I have crossed now with a division. They are still very much a tough nut to crack. They have got plenty of troops in cover. I am now, however, shelling them from multiple directions. One of the things that I'm pretty like feather in my cap, let me toot my horn about it kind of thing, is the river bend has got phenomenal access to the rear of the Union position. You can snipe from that side of the river. You can place artillery there, and they can just reap a toll. They can just cause all kinds of untold havoc. So Wallace here, he is holding on steadfast. Nope, not Wallace, Walker. He is holding on steadfast. He is the extreme left of the Union position. He is currently wrapped by 3 brigades, 2 to his rear, 2 to his left. He's being approached by an entire division to his front. He's being artilleried. He was for a time being sniped. He's massively outflanked. Now, he is, to his credit, in good cover. And there's an officer, I think, somewhere nearby. And he's getting good kills. So when he shoots at me, he hits hard and causes all kinds of problems. But all of that having been said, he can only hold that position for so long. He causes me a lot of havoc, but honestly, once I get an inch, once I get a tiny itty bitty little toe hold, their line unravels almost immediately. It is like watching dominoes. It is an incredibly uphill battle to get Walker to quit those trenches. He loses 500 men in the process and kills, I think, about that many, honestly. And then in very short order, the other unit looks like Starkweather, I think, is the other unit in the trenches there. Yeah, Starkweather, Starkwater, something kind of like that. Very short order, he quits the trenches. And then, now, once that happens, I will have my units in a wooded, covered position where they can fire at Price. And then, I mean, you can just kind of see, right, like how it's going to happen. It's just rolling up. It's just rolling up the Union Army at that point in time. And that's exactly what we do. It's really impressive. I think it underscores in my mind how like impressive it was that Walker fought, how hard he fought. what's interesting is that I wasn't intending any of these units on the left to really do any fighting. My intention was that they were going to fight hard at the beginning of the day, and they were going to rest for the remainder of the battle because they'd done their bit for king and country. And I was wrong. Because the Union starts kind of coming out of its trenches. Now that I've evicted it from its preferred position, it's now kind of like, well, okay, fine. Screw you too, buddy. I'm going to come and attack your dudes. And these units that I had kind of intended to sort of just sit there for the rest of the battle and just kind of rest and, you know, I don't know, tell bullshit stories about when they were kids or whatever. They start coming under attack. So that's great because it accelerates the destruction of the Union Army, but it's also a mess. Here's Walker again, charging in, and then right behind him is Shepard. Shepard is an absolute monster. So once again, Walker enables the rest of the army to kick all kinds of butt. Shepard gets in here, and he hungers. Shepard cares not from where the blood flows as long as the blood flows. He doesn't destroy, but he causes just amazing carnage, amazing casualties. And I just keep on throwing more bodies into the meat grinder, hoping to go ahead and just tire him out or send him running or whatever. I'm flanking him. I'm shooting artillery at him. Shepard couldn't begin to care less about any of this stuff. It's phenomenal. It was very frustrating to watch when it happened, but at the same time, I was like, my God, that's impressive. He's incredibly overexposed. He's got to be close to white shielding at this point in time. He's still, however, relentlessly charging after 7th Louisiana. It was very, very cool when this happened, and I'm glad that it's returning to a video again. I don't really know what happened in the middle there, but I'm glad you're getting to see this part of it. I really don't know from a technical level what exactly happened there. But I will look into it, and I'm going to make it better for the next video. But, man, Shepard was a monster. So I think he gets Union MVP of the battle. Although very close, I would say, in consideration would also be Walker, who really enabled Shepard to get in there without getting shot on the way in, and also held like a gosh darn rock in those trenches earlier. So those two units, in my mind, for sure, get Union MVP. Confederate MVP, it feels like it's just redundant at this point to say like, aha, the long rifles, but the long rifles just did so much work. They, I think, combined netted like 11,000 kills by themselves, which is just beyond stupid. So I'm going to say that the MVP of the battle is instead the Confederate light infantry, because actually every version of the light infantry did really wonderful work in this battle. The line infantry did what the line infantry does, right? The poor bloody infantry. They did the majority of the fighting, and more importantly, they did the majority of the dying. They held the line when it was ugly and not particularly enjoyable to hold, and yet they still held it. So, but the light, I think in particular, the light foot, really empowered a lot of the flanking. They empower a lot of the aggressive maneuver. They handle a lot of the melee. The artillery does good work in this battle, but I think for real, the winner for me was the light infantry, who just really punched way above their weight class, certainly above their level of expenditure. Here you're seeing the last bits of the Union Army as it collapses in on itself around the western Nashville Pike. Still, as you can see, plenty of men, plenty of dudes, lots of fight. No artillery at this point, to my knowledge, which is a huge problem for them, obviously. No light infantry for them at this point, and no cavalry at this point. So huge problems. They're left with nothing but infantry, which works just fine in the base game and is a real problem for them here. Is they will never be able to punch out of their current position. So we continue to wrap, and they continue to occupy trenches. They continue to try and develop an offensive on my left, their right. It never goes anywhere because they lack supporting arms. And I talked about this a lot in the last playthrough when I was playing as the Union, but I don't think I've really talked about it much in the rebal or the context of the rebal here. But while the infantry does the majority of your killing and also the majority of your dying, I have a strong belief, and I think that one of the things that Johnny and Panda have really nailed in this game or this version of the game, is that you can relieve so much of that pressure, specifically the dying part, from your infantry with your supporting arms. Yeah, okay. For 1st Virginia Sharpshooters got 9,000 kills, and 4th Texas Long got 3,000 kills. All right, fine. That is a truly stupid amount of kills per man in that unit, especially because they lost, I think, a net of 30 across their entire, those 2 skirmisher units. You can remove a lot of the pressure from your infantry with your supporting arms. Skirmishers let you see stuff long before it's a threat, so you can earmark appropriately the kind of response you need to earmark for it. So whether that's bringing infantry up or retreating infantry or bringing artillery over or flank fires or something else to sort of steal the thunder, so to speak, from an attacking unit, even if they don't get the majority of the kills. Like, the long rifles are great. Okay, awesome. But regular light infantry with just muskets or fucking strong language, who cares? It's excellent for that kind of thing. It takes the wind out of the Union sails, or the attacking AI sails. They can cover territory faster. They can see farther. They're an incredibly important linchpin unit. And I get it that they're not really like up to the challenge of a traditional stand-up, knockdown, drag-out. But I think without a doubt, they are one of the most important units in your roster to get good with using. They don't even need to be the sniper variant. The sniper variant's just like, you can kind of just forget about it sometimes, and especially now that it won't go charging halfway across the map or stand there completely idle because like a twig blew off of a tree and now the twig is between the unit you told them to shoot and something else. So those are all obviously important. Artillery, the importance of artillery, like I can't begin to, like at great length talk about how that's important. But here again, it takes the weight off of your infantry, not because you've blasted the enemy into submission, but because every time you shoot an enemy unit with artillery, it loses morale in excess to the amount of casualties you actually inflict. So yes, of course, the raw killing power of artillery is important, but the supportive power of artillery is even more important. Take Kraft over here, for example. He takes 3 or 4 volleys before finally routing. If I didn't have a division of infantry over there, he would have continued standing there and shooting and trading pretty effectively with my guys. That's horrible for me. One skirmisher unit or one artillery unit would have made Kraft like get out of there even faster. Take a look, another example. I'm able to scout the entirety of this Union position. And yeah, okay, so I don't know. Now all of a sudden it's a video again. I have no idea what happened in the middle there. Again, my massive apologies. I will work on this. Every version of these support arm units makes the infantry's job easier, but I maintain you can't replace the infantry with them. You can't. I know Panda's made the argument that occasionally you could think about replacing all of the regular infantry units in your army with light infantry, and you would be surprised at how effective they were in that role. And you know what? I don't think he's wrong. There's a version of this game where you play as a Prussian general, and you try it that way, and I'm sure it works better than you'd think. But yeah, I don't know. So we've got Wagner here. He's overextended, and so this doesn't go well for me. And I'm really mad at myself for like undercommitting to the attack. But it's actually, I think, really good evidence of like if you want to use your cavalry as melee cavalry, you need to equip them as melee cavalry, because Wagner's routing, like straight up white shield running away routing when he gets charged by 2 different cav units who both have carbines. and he somehow manages to rally enough to like send my guys running. He kills an officer. And then I get in there with 4th Virginia, and they've got, I believe, shotguns. And the 3rd Florida Dragoons, who I believe have swords. And they tear him a new one. They destroy him in that regard. So now we're coming in for the kill. You see all the infantry kind of advancing in unison. I'm trying to close the noose all at once. And you look at the difference in the parts of the line where I'm only attacking with infantry. So take a look at the left over here versus the part of the line where I'm attacking with infantry supported by artillery and scouts. And the difference in how many casualties each attack front takes is staggering. And a lot of it is the range and ability for each of these attacks or each of these groups to attack with. And then it's also the fact that I guess there's more, in fairness, there's more troops facing that force in one direction than the other. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to swarm in with all my infantry and push the Union out of the cover. I want them in the open. I want them in the corner. And I'm going to continue maneuvering aggressively with my command. I have the cavalry in the north. I have all of this infantry moving to advance and join the attack. I am trying to get them in the open in a place. We do lose, I believe, 5th. I think I get them out of there, but we do take more losses. I continuously get the timing on this wrong. And yeah. So I don't know what happens as far as that part's concerned with regard to why I don't wait to get that charge in. I think I'm trying too hard to get these captures because I see all the possibilities in front of me as far as captures are concerned. But I'm trying to make this happen. I'm trying to confuse the Union with too many targets coming from too many directions. I want them, as many of them, white shielded as possible so I can come in and get the charge or get off the captures. Now, I'm looking at the timestamp and how much video I have left to go over versus how much longer is in the battle. I think it's possible some of my after battle camp screen stuff gets cut off here. So just as a heads up, we do get everyone. We capture a lot, and I'm surprised, frankly, at how much we capture. And it's very good. I'm quite happy with how much we capture. We suffer something to the effect of 12,000 casualties, 11,000 casualties, thereabouts, pre-medicine in the Union or the Confederacy. So that ends up looking more like 9-ish thousand, give or take. And the 100% of the Union force is destroyed or captured. Harker alone is a hell of a boon. He's 2,700 men, all with 61s. Now, obviously, we're not going to get 100% of those, but we're going to get more than if we killed them. And the Grenadiers gets really weird because they keep on getting shot, and that part's not great, obviously, but they're getting great kill ratios. Wagner's weird because he's trapped in the corner, so he won't surrender. So I try to leave the corner, but he's coming with me the entire way, which is strange. 7th Dragoon is a brand new unit, but they've started the battle at 1,000 men. So yeah, they've taken a lot of losses, but there's just a lot of cav, and they've been getting a lot of melee kills. So their melee skill stat is up. And yeah, okay, the video cut out. So not much longer the battle actually ends. I probably ran out of maybe hard drive space. I don't really know. But that's it for Stones River. I will take a look at these hardware issues going into the next video. I do apologize because I don't really understand what was happening. You should not have to watch a slideshow. That's not the kind of content I produce. So I'll do better in the future, and I hope you enjoyed. I will say that as long as this battle is, I had a freaking blast playing this thing. It is a gigantic map, and you really feel like you're commanding a massive army because, hey, you are. So here's to the march to the next battle. I don't actually know what it is. Maybe it's Gettysburg? I don't think we're there yet. Chickamauga? Who knows? Whatever. I'll see you in the next one. You guys have a great couple of days, but until then, this is